Hello, everybody, and welcome to my channel. My name is Rainer, and this is Rainier Books. It's Saturday today. It's the 20th of September, and autumn or fall, as you might call it, is beginning very, very soon. On Monday this week, which was the 15th of September, in Canada, beautiful country in the north of North America, the Gillerprize Longlist was announced, and 14 books are on this long list, 14 Canadian books or books with connections to Canada. And there were 11 women and 3 men who are nominated for this year's Giller Award. And I want to give you the list and with my spontaneous comments to the books. I think I found, because I did this video before this week, but then I couldn't publish it because it was already too dark. I have lots of works. And like the former American president, I think George Bush the Elder, would say this week, I really had jobs. And yesterday there was a huge event at my work. We had the German Teachers' Day of 2025. I had to produce that show and to do really everything from ordering beer and wine and food and fruit and whatever to signing the people who gave lectures or workshops, to talk to the people, to clean afterwards. There was a lot of work. But it was also very satisfying work because the people really were very grateful and thankful for the opportunity to come to our place and to my working place and to meet each other and meet us and listen to some input that helps them. But now, the Gillerprize Longlist, if you haven't switched over to the next channel yet. Here are the contenders. Otherworld, stories by André, Alexis, published by McClelland and Stewart. A Trinidadian Obeah man finds himself reborn 100 years after his death in the body of a Canadian child. A writer takes up a seasonal job as the caretaker of a set of mysterious large sacks hanging from the rafters to the houses in a small town. I don't know if I even understand that. A woman starts a relationship with a famous artist who painted portraits of her mother. I understand that. The contents of a sealed envelope upend a woman's understanding about a tragic crime she committed at the age of 6. That's always the way publishers describe short story collections. They pick like 4 or 5 short stories and summarize them in one sentence. In this dazzling collection of stories, André, Alexis draws fresh connections between worlds, the ones we occupy, the ones we imagine, and the ones that preceded our own. He introduces us to characters during moments of profound puzzlement and transports us from 19th century Trinidad and Tobago to small-town Ontario, from Amherst, Massachusetts, which is pretty famous, I think, to contemporary Toronto. Well, and also he's referencing works from greats like Jane Austen, Jonathan Swift, Yasunari Kawabata, Witold Gombrowicz, and Tommaso Landolfi. Wow. Probably I won't get this book because short stories are... The library is more conservative in buying short story collections here in Stockholm. And also, it's a Canadian book with a Canadian publisher, I think, McClelland Stewart. And Canadian books are not so in the focus of the library as American, British books are, unfortunately. But I would read 1 or 2 stories, at least, of that book. And I like that project that I saw on BookTube recently, 30 days, 30 stories. And I might do something similar in the future because I have a lot of collections of short stories. Not a lot, but I have many. I have some collections of short stories on my shelves here. And maybe I could do this and read like 10 short stories in 10 days from these books. That could be a project. Number 2, We Love You, Bunny by Mona Awad, published by Scribner, Canada, on September the 23rd, which is next week on, let me say Tuesday. In the cult classic novel Bunny, I read that, Samantha Heather McKay, a lonely outsider student at a highly selective MFA program in New England in the US, was first ostracized and then seduced by a clique of creepy, sweet, rich girls who called themselves Bunny. I remember that when. Very well. An invitation to the Bunny's smut salon leads Samantha down a dark rabbit hole. Now she's back. And We Love You, Bunny. Sam has just published her first novel to critical acclaim. But coming to New England on her book tour with her new book, her one-time frenemies, furious at the way they've been portrayed, kidnap her. Oh my God. And the story goes on. With this bunny story goes on. I'm not really interested in reading that. I read the first one, Bunny. I didn't like it. I know it's a cult book for many people, especially those who love dark academia, but I don't do this. So I skipped this. But of course, nice to have Mona Awad on the list. And please comment down below if you love Bunny and if you are going to read We Love You, Bunny. Is it We Love You, Bunny? Yeah, We Love You, Bunny. An Astonishment of Stars. Again, we have short stories here by Kirti Bhadresa, published by ECW Press. And again, we have these one-liners. The wife who uses the name of her white husband in public. The mother who cleans the small-town hospital while her daughter moves to the city to forget their shared past. The well-behaved teen girl who anxiously watches her older sister slip further and further away from their hovering parents. Each of these characters is both familiar and singular, reminding us of women we have been, of our mothers and daughters, neighbors and adversaries. Kirti Bhadresa is a keen observer of humanity, especially of the BIPOC women whose domestic and professional work is the backbone of late-stage capitalism, but whose lives receive so little attention in mainstream culture. An Astonishment of Stars is a collection that sees those who are unseen. That could be interesting to read, as I said, with the book by André, Alexis, 1 or 2 or 3 stories, and decide if you're going to read the whole thing. I'm interested, but I'm also skeptical about getting this book really to the library, and I won't buy it. The Tiger and the Cosmonaut by Eddy Boudel and published by Viking. Casper Hahn grew up the dutiful son of immigrants who never felt entirely welcome in their remote corner of British Columbia. I love British Columbia. It was the only province I ever visited in Canada. Now an adult living in Vancouver, which is the only city I ever visited in Canada, with a boyfriend whose privilege he quietly resents. Casper rarely returns to his hometown, the site of a grief his family doesn't discuss the loss of his twin brother, Sam. Over 20 years have passed since Sam went missing, and now it comes back to a very famous or very often used story, what really happened to Sam. So the brother died 20 years ago, and a lot of family secrets. Yeah, and we're going to find out what really happened to Sam. Combining the atmosphere and intrigue of a cracking good suspense novel with the depth of a rich character study, The Tiger and the Cosmonaut tells a story of a family whose members have long made themselves small, and quiet, and obedient, and what happens when the cycle is finally broken. Could be interesting. We have read this before, the plot, kind of, but it could be interesting. Sugaring Off by Fanny Britt, translated by Susan Ouriou, published by Book Star Hug Press. Sounds very interesting publisher, right? On the surface, Adam and Marion are the embodiment of success, wealthy, attractive, in love. While holidaying in Martha's Vineyard, again, the United States, Adam serves into a local young woman. He serves into a woman, Celia. The accident leaves her injured and financially at risk. For Adam and Marion, it opens a fault of loneliness, rage, and desires that have too long been ignored. Like a modern Virginia Woolf, wow, Britt abrades the surface layer of our outward personas, delving into the complexity and contradictions of relationships. In this eviscerating critique of privilege, she asks what happens when one can no longer play a role, whether in a couple, a family, or social structure, and exposes the resulting friction between pleasure and consequence. Yeah. Virginia Woolf. Wow, what a comparison. Fanny Britt must be happy with that, but I don't think that I'm so much into that novel. Still by Joanna Cockerline, published by Porcupine's Quill. I was interested in that one. Here comes the story. Still is the story of Kayla, who lives and works on the streets of Kelowna, Canada, and of little Zoe, a woman working in the sex trade who's missing. Set in a vibrant and diverse community of people living unhoused, the novel explores sex work, street life, the opioid crisis, what it means to survive, and what it means to find a home, especially in oneself. As Kayla, whose past is darker than she tells, searches for a missing friend, she also uncovers much about her own life. The novel delves into both the pain and resiliency of childhood, with flashbacks to Kayla's past with horses and how she came to be on the streets. Kayla also becomes friends with an outreach volunteer struggling with postpartum depression, alcohol abuse, and bipolar, yet who yearns to rekindle her passion for photography and share it with Kayla. Lots of people in misery, lots of topics like opioid crisis, sex work, and the downside or the back streets of North America here, of Canada. I'm interested in that one. I don't want to read happy stuff too much. What reader am I actually? I wonder sometimes. Next one is interesting, and this might actually reach the library here in Stockholm because it's by a very famous Canadian, I think she's also British, writer, Emma Donoghue, The Paris Express by Emma Donoghue, published by Harper Avenue in Canada. The Paris Express is set over a single day as the morning train travels from the Normandy coast to the capital, to Paris, to Paris. Men, women, and children from all over the world take the seats in the passenger cars, which are divided by wealth and status. Among the passengers is an anarchist intent on destruction, a young boy traveling alone, a pregnant woman fleeing her home village for the anonymity of the big city, a medical student who suspects a girl may have a fatal disease, and the railway crew devoted to the train and company and to each other. Based on an 1895 catastrophe, oh my god, it's a catastrophe, that was captured in a series of surreal photographs, The Paris Express is a thrilling ride and a literary masterpiece full of the politics, fears, and chaos of an era not unlike our own. And that, I think, was what interested me, that Donoghue might be portraying a historical time, 1895 catastrophe on the train, with the times we are living in, where we are so divided, when we sometimes think that this is just crazy, and a big country that has called itself always the biggest democracy on earth has walked into autocracy and dictatorship within just a few months. Yeah, that could be interesting. The Sideways Life of Denny Voss by Holly Kennedy, published by Rose Point Publishing. Never heard of the publisher, and never heard of the author as well. On the surface, Denny Voss's life in rural Minnesota, again in the US, is a quiet one. At 30 years old, he lives at home with his elderly mother and his beloved blind and deaf St. Bernard George. He cleans up roadkill to help pay the bills. Bad job. Though his prospects are limited by a developmental delay, the result of an accident at birth, Denny has always felt that he has a good life, quote unquote. So how did he wind up being charged with the murder of a mayoral candidate after crashing a sled full of guns into a shred? Into a tree, shred. As Denny awaits trial, his court-appointed therapist walks him through the events of the past year. Denny's had other scuffles with the law, the first for kidnapping a neighbor's cantankerous goose. And then there was a time he accidentally assisted in a bank robbery. It seems like whenever Denny tries to do the right thing, chaos ensues. Untangling the events around the murder reveals even more painful truths about his family's past. He's always been surrounded by people who love him, but now it's up to Denny to set his life on a new course. Keith Morrison, impersonating Keith Morrison, but not good. Okay, this could be interesting. Sounds like a thriller a little bit, The Sideways Life of Denny Voss, but also about this guy who is a little, how did they say here in the text, developmental delay, suffering from developmental delay, and I had heard that story before, and this story has been written before many times, but it's always interesting to take a look at it. So this is Minnesota. Minnesota is, of course, a state that is bordering to Canada, so it could be interesting. The Life Cycle of the Common Octopus by Emma Knight. That sounds not interesting. The title sounds not interesting to me. Published by Viking. Arriving at the University of Edinburgh, which is Scotland, for her first autumn, Pan knows her divorced parents back in Canada are hiding something from her. Another novel about secrets. She believes she'll find the answer here in Scotland, where an old friend of her father's, now a famous writer known as Lord Lennox, lives. When she is invited to spend the weekend at Lord Lennox's centuries-old estate with his enveloping, intriguing family, Pack begins to unravel her parents' secret and to fall in love for the first time. A novel about love, falling in love in a strange old estate, century-old estate. Her best friend Alice, an aspiring actress starring in a university production, and making the most of the feminine power she wields until a tryst with her tutor threatens to spin out of control. As Penn experiences the sharp shock of adulthood, she uncovers the truth about her own family and comes to rely on herself for the first time in her life. A rich and rewarding novel of campus life, of sexual awakening, and ultimately of the many ways women can become mothers in this world, The Life Cycle of the Common Octopus asks to what extent we need to look back in order to move forward. Now, it sounds a little bit traditional, conservative. It's also an academia novel, campus life. playing on an old estate in Scotland. In front of my eyes, I see a huge castle-like building structure, lots of secrets. And that sounds so 1950 and 60 that I'm not so interested in reading that. And the title, The Life Cycle of the Octopus. Come on. We the Kindling by Otoniya J. Okot Bitek, published by Alchemy, which is not of Canada, I think. As this spare and luminous novel begins, we meet Miriam, Helen, and Maggie, three friends who years ago, when they were school children, survived capture by the Lord's resistant army in northern Uganda. Now as the women go about their new lives in the city, shopping, caring for their children, planning and thinking about what the future might hold, we come to understand how deeply their past haunts the present. In graceful yet unflinching prose, Otoniya Okot Bitek weaves vivid folk tales with taut realism, revealing flashes of life before the war that ravaged Uganda, unspooling the terrible events that led to abductions of children from supposedly safe schools, and tracing perilous journeys home again. Facing endless treks across the ravaged countryside and through narrow mountain passes, gun battles, and constant brutality, many girls did not survive. Those who did make it back home, some carrying small children of their own, bore the unspoken weight of their experiences within families and communities that often wished to forget and move on. In We the Kindling, Okot Bitek insistently refuses to turn away or to spectacularize tragedy, shaping a chorus of women's voices into a hauntingly beautiful novel, suffused with care and humanity. It sounds very, very interesting, this book, about the past that haunts the present, about, I guess that these women are now living in Canada. It doesn't say that explicitly, so we'll see. We the Kindling by Otoniya J. Okot Bitek. I hope that I can be able to get this. The Road Between Us by Bindu Suresh, published by Assembly Press. S. Taylor, a lawyer, struggles professionally after a deep childhood loss and an ill-advised undergraduate alliance. Ash is a diplomat posted to Buenos Aires and Beijing who wants what he can't have. Ophélie, a nurse, makes a grievous medical error that alters the course of her life. And Roman is an academic whose careless sexual escapades after a painful divorce lead to even more painful consequences. Tense, poetic, and as binge-worthy as a miniseries, The Road Between Us explores why we make the decisions we do and how those decisions affect the people we love. It doesn't say so much about the book, actually. So I still want to see it, and I still want to get a hold on it. And maybe I don't, and then I will watch Jolene's review. Next one I'm in for because I read the collection of short stories that the author won the Gillerprize a few years back. Now she comes with a whole novel. It's called Pick a Color, and the author is Souvankham Thammavongsa, published by Knopf in Canada. Ning is a retired boxer, but to the customers who visit her nail salon, she's just another worker named Susan. On this summer's day, much like any other, the Susans buff and clip and polish and tweeze. They listen and smile and nod, but beneath the superficial veneer, Ning is a woman of rigorous intellect and profound depth. A woman enthralled by the intricacy and rhythms of her work, but also haunted by memories of paths not taken and opportunities lost. A woman navigating the complicated power dynamics among her fellow Susans, whose greatest fears and desires lie just behind the gossip they exchange. As the day's work grinds on, the friction between Ning's two identities, as anonymous manicurist and brilliant observer of her own circumstances, will gather electric and crackling force, and at last demand a reckoning with the way the world of privilege looks at a woman like Ning. Told over a single day, with razor-sharp precision and wit, Pick a Color confirms Souvankham Thammavongsa's plays as literature premier chronicler of the immigrant experience in its myriad complex and slightly subversive forms. I want to read that. I might have to buy that. You've Changed by Ian Williams, published by Random House Canada. Middle-aged and about to be dumped from his construction job, Beckett is not feeling his best, especially since his wife, Princess, is already pressuring him to improve himself. She's a fitness instructor who spends a lot of time and energy fine-tuning every inch of her body. Still, they both think the marriage is basically fine until a couple of friends show up for a visit, the mutual affection and sexual chemistry loudly on display. And one weekend, they upset the tenuous balance between Beckett and Princess, throwing them into parallel midlife crises. Princess thinks the problem is physical and attempts to revive Beckett's interest with relentless surgical alterations and bodily enhancements that have the opposite effect on her husband. Beckett tries to woo Princess back to him by relaunching his contracting business, laying his manly accomplishments at her feet. And while Princess is away pursuing even more drastic beauty measures, Beckett meets Gluten, an energetic and erratic man devoted to living in the moment whom Beckett feels drawn to in many ways that surprise him. Beckett is changing, Princess is changing. What will happen to their already stressed marriage? Sharp, inventive, and absurdly funny, You've Changed is a wild ride exploring identity, insecurity, intimacy, and desire, and who individuals become when they unite and how they change, despite promising not to. It sounds like an exploration of relationships. It could be very interesting to the fact that this book seems to explore how people promise each other, I will always be the same, and then you change anyway, and that crackles the relationship. That could be an interesting novel. Wildlife by Amanda Leduc also takes us to Scotland. It was published by Random House in Canada. Amanda Leduc's dazzling new novel follows two walking, talking hyenas as they interact with humans over decades. Blurring the line between human and animal, these strange messengers reveal what is possible when the cages that contains us are broken. And it starts in 19th century Scotland, who we meet young Josiah, who's banished by his father for seeing the divine in the animals around him, sent to Siberia with a small Christian mission to purge such nonsense from his soul. Miserably scrubbing the chapel floor one night, Josiah is visited by what he thinks is God in animal form. His saviors, a hyena and her mate, rescue him from a natural disaster that kills the other missionaries and bring him safely home. He founds a religion based on his belief that God granted speech to the hyenas as part of a divine plan to heal and exalt the human race. No, Amanda, I'm sorry, but this is way too far from my reality, and I think from all of our realities. I know that some people love fables, and there seems to be like a fable where hyenas are talking to mankind, but it's not what I'm looking for right now in our times. They seem so real. Maybe we need escapism, but not this kind of escapism. I'm not interested in that one. So these were the 14 books of the Gillerprize Longlist. Are you interested in 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe even 14 of them? Tell me in the comments down below. Tell me also if you are from Canada, if you've read any of these books, if you have gotten, or if you're from New Zealand and love Canadian literature and have found any of these books very, very funny, readable, and engaging, thought-provoking. I will hopefully get to 2 or 3 of them because I'm always in for a good Canadian book. But I'm also hoping that I see you in the next video on this channel, which will be a review of Michael Connelly's latest novel, Nightshade. Thanks very much for watching this. Subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment, leave me a like, and have a good one, and see you later.